So, Bud, I'll let you sort of take the lead on this. For those, if we were to just go NIL for dummies, what is some of the basics of how NIL works? And let's be practical about it while also acknowledging the realities, right? Because there is, we're going to give you this much a month. But then there's the NCAA that's like, well, what are the deals for it? And, how do how does the collective put that all together? NIL for dummies. How do these kids get paid?
So, all right. In theory, NIL is name, image, and likeness. So it's supposed to, in theory, correlate with what your sort of fame and marketing value is. In practice, they really set up NIL, they being the schools and the NCAA, so that the schools wouldn't have to pay the players anything, right? They're like, okay, don't really care how it works a whole lot as long as we don't have to be the ones funding it. So we can stick it on the fans who care about winning a lot of ball games. And a lot of programs have fans who do care about winning a lot of ball games. Now, as far as NIL, if you're doing a deal with just a brand, then it just looks like a standard marketing or advertising agreement. If you're doing a deal with a collective, a lot of times what they'll do is do it as a marketing advance, right? So they're paying you for the entirety of your NIL rights over some period, basically your marketing and branding rights. And then they'll go and they'll shop that out. So you kind of agree to a deal with XYZ collective, you're making X amount per month. Maybe you get a little signing bonus with that. Maybe there's some other bonuses that are timed at certain times in the year within that deal that might also be timed to like maybe a week after the transfer portal window closes.
Interesting.
And there may be some some future advance type stuff that you have to pay back if you happen to leave the school. You may be signing over your NIL rights for a certain number of years, which does have some complications if you're going to transfer somewhere. So it's not a buyout, but it's kind of a pseudo buyout. And I think some guys probably have to pay those back to certain to different schools if they do leave. But ultimately, I think for the really big guys, not like a Shador or a Travis Hunter, who are like legit celebrity guys, like probably not a Caleb Williams, but like for your guys who are celebrities within the huge college ball fan space because everybody knows how good they are, but they're not like get stopped in a grocery store in a major city type thing.
Cam Ward.
Correct. Cam Ward, Walter Nolan, Caleb Downs. Okay. Like the average person on the street doesn't know what Caleb Downs' face looks like. We all know he's a stud. Those guys, I think for the most part, are signing like marketing deals with the collective, which think of it as like a marketing agency, and they're getting marketing advances on it. And then the collective goes and farms out to whomever who wants to work with them.
And when the NCAA comes around, it's on the collective to be able to have some paperwork to say that these marketing deals are not just payments, which functionally they are.
Correct. And in reality, I would think that every collective is kind of working with the recruiting department. And it's like, all right, here's our budget. We took a question on this last show or a couple shows ago. Do you think that these payments will closely resemble positional value?
Oh, yeah.
Like the NFL. And yeah, I think they do, right? It's like, how much do you want to spend on the quarterback room? We had this with Oklahoma. We had this with Kansas State, right? If you got a young stud coming up, can you afford to pay both? Does it make sense? From a marketing standpoint, of course it makes sense. From a roster management standpoint, not really. So that's basically how that works.
We had a good question. Cover 3 Tailgate, as soon as the link goes live, if you want to come in and drop questions, especially as we're waiting for the show to start. So, Kyle, what does an NIL contract look like? But I think you did a good with that. Here we go. There are rumors that Walter Nolan had a buyout that Ole Miss had to pay A&M because he left early. Feels like message board BS, but is that even possible? And how do you enforce that?
It's certainly possible. Now, how do you enforce it if they're like, hey, you owe us this, and the kid's like, sue me for it? Do you want to be the first school to really sue a kid? It doesn't look good, right? Of course, you could do it once he's off to the NFL if you want to. But no, you could absolutely put it in there. A penalty for breaking the contract, signing with a different agency. Yeah.
What goes into a bidding war?
So your agent's basically shopping you around.
Yeah.
You know, hey, like he really likes his school. He needs this amount. This
Is he talking to the coaches? So coaches are talking to agent?
I think for the most part, it's not directly with the coach. You know, it's probably.
I think there's still some kind of old school bagman kind of separation anxiety type stuff going where the coach doesn't want to be directly involved.
Correct. Yeah. Right. That's. You're probably talking to the two different collectives. Hey, this marketing agency collective is giving me this, and this one wants to give me this. And they might be like, well, state tax there is this, and it is a pain for your mom to fly all the way out there. And they did go like 4-8 this year. So, like you sure you want to go out like to wherever you're going. But it's just like any kind of if you're somebody who is a marketable person, in like any of us, right? If our deal was up, hey, talking to whomever, right? Like, and trying to see who give you the best offer, basically.
CNN Sports.
Dude.
I think the dirty little secret, and this is why agents have had an absolute field day, and they're like pigs in slop right now, is NFL contracts, the collectively bargained, what an agent can take. It's 3%.
Yeah.
But with marketing deals, which is technically what NIL is, they can now majority, like I've done some marketing deals, it's 20%. What these agents are taking is they're raping these kids. 30%. Some you've heard 30% of the deals the agent is taking, which is highway robbery. Like that is wrong. And I think that's one of the reasons that doesn't, like, I know coaches want regulation to help manage their rosters. Players need regulation to help them from getting robbed by these agents who are taking this much of their money. Even like a broadcast agent takes 10% and they'll negotiate down. You're talking about 17, 18, 19-year-old kids who don't really know how to negotiate that, and they're just happy to be paid. Oh, I'm getting paid? Sure. Send me the end money. Like, you just get the check. A lot of them don't realize how much they're getting taken advantage of right now.
In almost all instances, it's the first deal a kid signed. So it's always their first time, right? And Danny's right. They do get robbed, quite a bit by some guys out there. But I think word starts to get around a little bit, like, hey, like this guy, pulled this kind of thing, and players talk. The industry will evolve, just as any industry does, right? But it's so new.
Back to the UBI comment. I am in favor of a collectively bargained, structured, salary style arrangement for players who are competing at the highest levels. We keep talking about getting there. We just don't know the mechanics of it, especially with the NCAA fighting at every single corner to be able to make sure that there's a big voice somewhere that says that they're not employees. So, as that continues to play out through the courts, I don't know when we will get to a collectively bargained future, but I would be in favor of it, especially for, allowing these players to have some protections and also preventing the donors from having to give. Because that's another thing. I mean, do we talk about donor fatigue much on here? Because I think that's another part of this that's really, really tough. Mm-hmm. I mean, y'all seen the Carolina fan who's been eating ramen for like 9 days in a row? He eats ramen for dinner every night, and then he donates to Carolina's NIL. And he started it after Mac Brown had that press conference.
Wow.
And I looked at his last update, and he was like, physically, don't feel well. Had some calf spasms, but emotionally and spiritually, I feel great. I love doing something for something bigger than me. But we can't have our donors eating ramen every night just so that you can protect your roster and be able to make a splash in the transfer portal.
But I hear you. I agree with you. I think the system is flawed. And it does put, like, it's so weird that you have coaches making 10, 11 million bucks asking for more money to help pay their raw. It doesn't make any sense. But I don't know if we properly assess the crazy passion of college football fans. Mm-hmm. Like, we've seen money raised to fire a coach. And I think losing is probably the biggest motivator. Like Ohio State, told you my Ben Hartsock story. He got an email. Hey, we need your help because Michigan just won a national championship. We can't let that happen. So your fans like, all right, let's go. We got to beat them. Same thing you see Texas A&M. We never thought in a million years Jimbo would be fired with the $76 million buyout. They find the money, you know, like it's always there. I don't want it to have to be that. I hate the request, but I think sometimes we don't accurately, you know, get a handle on just how crazy fans are. Like the guy that's eating ramen so he can donate to the NIL, you know, program.
CJ Stroud, please give us 50,000 to 100,000, please, for the love of God. Michigan just won the national title. I do think, like, yeah, I know.
Yeah,
I do think you touched on something there, though, Danny, that is just kind of funny to me and just reflective of the insanity of the way that this sport works. Is that coaches are getting 10 million, but these collectives are sending you letters saying, can you just donate $50 to $100 to help out as a fan or an alumnus? It's like there are better ways to get the money, especially because as long as one school has a billionaire that's just going to throw a bunch of money at you anyway, it doesn't really matter how much you, like, you know, crowdsource from your fans, because there's always just one guy who can completely change everything anyway.
Myth Busters. Everybody tampers, right? Am I wrong on that? By the letter of the law.
Is that an REM song?
Everybody tampers.
Sometimes.
I mean, my assumption is by the letter of the law for tampering, pretty much everybody could be found to have tampered. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I think so. I can't just say that every single staff tampers.
I mean, yeah, I don't know if UTEP is tampering.
Maybe Pitt doesn't, right? I mean, like Narduzzi came out pretty hard against USC, so maybe he really doesn't. Maybe the service academies don't tamper, right? Maybe like a Stanford or Vanderbilt, you know, don't tamper. Like some of them were, you know, academic schools. Maybe Dabo doesn't tamper. I mean, like, there's no evidence that he does, right? Because
there is not.
Well, but I think when you say everybody tampers, some member of every staff, I would say that's pretty safe. Even if
keeping
it's
the
like
relationship.
Exactly. I think it's a relationship. I think that's the difference. And I kind of alluded to this, I think, on Monday. I'm saying, like, normally, if you turned a coach down, he'd cuss you out and say, see you later, and you never talk to him again. Now, there's always like hey, it was great getting to know you. Let's stay in touch. And I think oftentimes the tampering is initiated by the player. Like, he might ask a coach, hey, you know, did you watch my game? Like, they like the positive affirmation. They like it. So, yeah, I think it's more relationships. I think it's almost impossible to monitor, you know, unless somebody gives them the screen grabs. And I'm actually okay with it. But now if you had the initiation of, do you want to come, you know, do you want to join us? Then I think that's where you cross the line. Or, hey, here's our collective guy. That's the tampering that I don't think you can have.
If you have an assistant coach requesting for all of the detailed information about your current NIL deal and then being able to solicit the connections to a counter proposal, then yeah, I would say that that's tampering. But by the letter of, like, communication between these massive staffs with all these coaches and all these personnel guys and all these different ways that you can talk, I feel like everyone does tamper. But you're right. There are certainly some coaches who would probably turn their focus elsewhere. And at least by the evidence suggested by transfer portal activity, you can point your fingers at a few others as well.